Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. National Security Advisor John Bolton got fired this morning, as you no doubt have heard. It's a major personnel change, but it's more than that. It is great news for America, especially for the large number of young people who would have been killed in pointless wars if Bolton had stayed on the job. They may not be celebrating tonight, but they should be. International oil prices, by the way, on the international market dropped immediately on the news. Investors knew for certain that Bolton planned on launching yet another Middle Eastern conflict that would inevitably spike energy prices. No doubt some energy speculators were disappointed to see Bolton go. Certainly many people in Washington were disappointed. Senator Chris Murphy, who's a Democrat from Connecticut, progressive one at that, tweeted that he was, quote, legitimately shaken to see John Bolton leave the White House. Samantha Power, you remember her, she's the Obama official, primarily responsible, among other things, for the historically catastrophic destruction of Libya, the move that flooded Europe with refugees. That official, Samantha Power, told reporters today that the firing was a very troubling sign. Believe it or not, a number of Republicans made similar noises. Senator Mitt Romney himself declared that he was, quote, very, very unhappy that Bolton was leaving. Romney went on to describe the outgoing national security advisor as, quote, a brilliant man with decades of experience in foreign policy. Romney didn't say much about this experience. He wasn't specific about it. Why? Probably because none of Bolton's experience in the end helped America. Romney's right. Bolton has, in fact, been on the scene for decades. All of us are suffering the consequences of it. But whatever. Details like that make no difference at all in Washington. In Washington, nobody cares what kind of job you did, only that you did the job. Nobody there learns from mistakes because mistakes are never even acknowledged, ever. John Bolton himself took this form of selective amnesia to an art form. Watch him perform it on this show. So you've called for regime change in Iraq, Libya, Iran, and Syria. In the first two countries, we've had regime change, and obviously it's been, I'd say, a disaster. I think we agree.
No, I don't agree with that. And let me.
You don't think it's been a disaster?
No, I think you need to understand. Is that life is complicated in the Middle East, and when you say, well, the overthrow of Saddam Hussein was a mistake, is simplistic.
I would argue that I'm the one who understands how complicated it is, but just my view.
It's your long experience in foreign policy. I know.
Better record than yours, I would say. Did you catch that? Rather than justify or even explain his own record, Bolton instead brags that he's spent a lot of time on the job. If you're wondering why so many progressives are mourning Bolton's firing tonight, it's because Bolton himself fundamentally was a man of the left. There was not a human problem John Bolton wasn't totally convinced could be solved with the brute force of government. That's an assumption of the left, not the right. Don't let the mustache fool you. John Bolton was one of the most progressive people in the Trump administration. And by the way, naturally, once he was ensconced there, Bolton promoted Obama loyalists within the National Security Council. That shouldn't surprise you either. From the very first day, John Bolton operated as, in effect, a fifth column within the Trump White House. We warned about him frequently on this show. When the president calls for peace with a heavily armed nuclear power, that is considered treason. But when the national security advisor calls for yet another pointless war, that's just elite consensus, and it's fine. A lifelong neocon, Bolton repeatedly has called for toppling the Iranian government again and again, though tellingly he's never suggested what might replace the Iranian government once it's toppled. To this day, Max Boot takes a paycheck from the Washington Post. Bill Kristol appears on MSNBC. John Bolton is this country's national security advisor. There were no consequences to their foolishness and their dishonesty. None. Yes, Mr. President, John Bolton does want to get you into a war. It's all he wants. It's what he dreams about. Many wars, if possible. And if you're not careful, he'll do it. In between administration jobs are always cushy think tank posts, paid speaking gigs, cable news contracts. War may be a disaster for America, but for John Bolton and his fellow neocons, it is always good business. We invited John Bolton on the show tonight. He did not respond to the invitation, which is a shame, but he's always welcome here. That's a sincere invitation. But in some ways, the story isn't simply about John Bolton. It's about the countless John Boltons who currently staff the federal bureaucracy. Deeply mediocre lifers, drunk on hubris, protected by bulletproof job security. They're more likely to die on the job than be fired, and they know it. As a group, these people have done an awful lot to make this country poorer and sadder and more divided. The actual John Bolton is gone, likely forever. The question tonight is, will he be replaced by another John Bolton just like him? And unfortunately, there are signs that that's possible. And in fact, in Washington, it's always possible. Change is not always for the better. Don't lie to yourself. Apparently on the short list tonight to replace Bolton is the president's special representative for Iran, Brian Hook. Hook may be a good person. He's also an unapologetic neocon. Sources say he has undisguised contempt for Donald Trump, as John Bolton did. And he particularly dislikes the president's nationalist foreign policy, which is one of the reasons people voted for Donald Trump in 2016. One administration official recalls Hook announcing that, quote, "I think the president is reckless and doesn't understand policy." Another source heard him directly say something very similar to foreign officials at a conference abroad. A choice like that, and Hook, by the way, is not the only one, not even close. A choice like that is really no choice at all. It's more John Bolton with the same predictable, disastrous results. At least Mitt Romney and the energy speculators will be happy, but the country won't be served.